There are no bad workmen anymore, just bad tools. Well, if that same logic applies to sales teams, there are no bad sales teams, there are just bad sales leaders. I don't know if that's true. I think there are sales leaders who could do a little bit of refinement in what they do and how they do it. There's my intro bold statement for you. I hope that I've hooked your attention just like a great prospecting outreach would. So I'm joined today by my good friend Derrick WIlliams, who he's the sales consultant. He's going to help me distill why do coaching people in sales like the sales leader often struggle, particularly as it pertains to cold calling. So Derrick, welcome to my show. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me here. It's always good to hang out with you, Ollie.
My pleasure. So big, broad topic. I'm sure there's plenty of places we can go with this. Help me distill the problem a little bit. Is it a time thing? So like if you're sat there as my VP of sales, what is the problem that we're going to have about why coaching is not going to work that well? Is it a time thing? Is it the content or your lack of content, or how I receive it, how you deliver it? What is it?
Yeah, if I understand the question, you're asking why isn't cold call coaching getting done effectively, right?
Why isn't it being done good, and why isn't it helping me out?
Yeah, well, why isn't it getting done? Definitely is a time and bandwidth issue. But I think fundamentally, as a seasoned frontline middle manager myself, you tend to work on the stuff that's, needs the most attention, and whatever squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of concept. So, if your higher ups are banging on you for reports and updates and initiatives that are happening in the business, then naturally you're going to prioritize that over coaching. And you got to layer that on the fact that a lot of reps don't even want you to coach them. Quite frankly, they think they have it figured out, and you have to kind of work through their resistance to even have that coaching dialogue. So there's the resistance, and then there's the distraction. And so there's obviously a lot of different reasons on why the coaching isn't getting done. But I definitely think that our managers, our frontline managers, are trying to serve our directors, VPs as effectively as possible. They know that there are promotions and bonuses, and their career path in some ways relies on the impression that they have with their higher ups. And so they tend to, I think a rookie middle manager is probably trying to appease their higher ups. But then, if you have a VP of sales that is bought in on the concept and really wants to drive home the importance of these frontline interactions that our BDRs and AEs are having on their cold calls, then the reason it's not happening then is a lot of times like the manager isn't good at coaching. They don't know how to coach. They haven't made many cold calls in the past. They're not confident in their ability to coach around cold calling. And so, I think there's a myriad of things that kind of get in the way. And it's real easy because it's the part of the job that most salespeople, SDRs included, don't want to do. And coaching is also an area that managers, quite frankly, a lot of times don't want to do. They don't want to deal with the resistance. And so I think just you add that up and it becomes deprioritized.
A few times you mentioned the sort of a resistance or a lack of wanting to do it and lack of wanting to receive the coaching.
Yeah.
I'm the opposite. I can't, when we're going to finish this webinar, I'm going to ask you and our producer, Daniel, what could I have done better? That's the type of person that I am. I absolutely hate being bad. So I would rather the pain of asking, how can I be better? Right. That's not everyone. And I appreciate at some point the feedback or the quality and that type of thing becomes less and less and less as you become more experienced. So there's that. If you've made 1 million cold calls, I don't know how much the feedback's really going to do for the coaching. How much new is there to learn? So there's that.
It goes back to your point, though. Even if you've made 1 million cold calls like myself, you're still open to new ideas, and you still have to remain open to fresh concepts. And, we all have our strengths and weaknesses. And if you've made 1 million cold calls, you've probably gone down that path of what's comfortable for you and works for you a lot of times. So it's worn down, and, you can rely on it. But for me, I'm not really good at humor a lot of times. And I know that's an effective tool to use when you're cold calling. And, I could definitely use some coaching and some feedback for opportunities on what to say and how to be clever on, and using humor to be memorable in a cold call. But I think, we have to stay fresh. It's like Kobe goes into the gym and shoots free throws right after, he won a championship. It's that same concept to what you're pointing out. But I think a lot of people kind of shy away from that in a lot of ways. They feel like the cold calling is a necessary evil that they have to do, as opposed to getting to do it.
Okay, but on the flip side of that, I would say, so your thing there about the humor, and maybe that might be something that could be coached into how you structure your cold call and how you deliver and execute it. Part of that comes back to the training content, and sort of managers and senior people are like shuddering, going, ugh, content, ugh. I don't want to have to deal with people making slide decks for me. But at a certain point, we can't just like fire up Zoom and you play one of your calls to me and I go, I heard this and we should execute this slightly differently. It just doesn't work like that. We end up sort of mediating rather than me coaching you. That's not coaching. That's having a conversation and a bit of a coffee talk, basically. But then if I'm going to sit there and have that formal slide deck, that's also exactly like you said before. That's time away from my Salesforce report or my VanillaSoft like cadence changes that I want to make and so on, right? So like, how have you seen people cross that? Is it the size of company? I imagine big companies with a proper enablement team probably find that easier, but not everyone works for that type of company. So that's like for us here, that'll be a bit of a pain in the butt.
Well, I mean, if you're asking how you cross the content chasm and getting that enabled for your people so they can have tangible reference tools to improve at cold calling, then yeah, I mean, in an early stage organization, you're probably just not going to have that unless you have a leader or someone on the team who's taking that extra initiative. And that's why, at certain stages of company, you have to hire accordingly too, right? If you know that you don't have the content, the enablement, and sort of a track record built out, a process that is repeatable, that you can teach people, then you really got to staff up with the right caliber of talent, people who are experienced at doing these sorts of things. Because if you're thinking you're going to take people in who haven't had that experience and they're going to come into an environment that doesn't have that, you're really not going to cross that chasm. But I think there's just an exception. I mean, you have to accept the reality of where you are in some cases, that you're not going to have perfect tools. So to your point, until you get to a certain stage or you have the right resources around you, you're just not going to have everything perfect. And expecting it to be perfect, having the right content and these sorts of things, I think is unrealistic at a certain stage of company.
Gotcha. Okay. So I think that's the state of play. That's the why is this a difficulty? And hopefully you, Mr. or Mrs. Watcher, are thinking, yeah, that's me right now. And they're talking about what I am living through right at this moment. So I've got 1, 2, 3 things on my other computer right here that I think we're going to go through. So we've got the one-on-one coaching, the group coaching, and then the balance of bending your style. Which one do you want to hit on first? Your pick.
So group coaching.
Group coaching. All right, we'll do that one first. So how do we do this in an ideal way? So I'm going to paint out how this can be done badly or wrong, and then you're going to tell me, hey, no, all of that's stupid. Let's do it that way.
Okay.
I'm picturing, like everyone close your eyes and think of the scene. The sales team is sat around a table or a Zoom like meeting room, and the manager goes, hey, we've got Derrick's call again because he's the best rep on the team, but we didn't say that out loud. And it's Derrick's same script that he uses every time and that we heard the week before and the week before and the week before every quarter because he's the best rep. What can we be coached about that? Everyone's kind of rolling their eyes, like half asleep. And then the worst rep who kind of gets rebuttals and gets shut down a lot, we also hear their call and everyone goes, oh, well, I think you should change it by doing this, Ollie, because the worst rep would be me. And it doesn't really help. And there's a bit of like a social dynamic going on there too, where it's not really a team. It's also dividing who's the favorite rep who gets brought on every time.
Someone's being put on a pedestal and someone's being, publicly humiliated.
That type of thing, very much so. And that creates who's actually listening, and therefore what is the point of 6 or 7 or however many humans sat here listening. That's bad. And also maybe it's weekly and that's too much or too little, that type of dynamic too. How do we not do that? Teach me.
Well, I think the frequency, again, if our primary channel of booking meetings, getting new opportunities created is by way of phone, if we've been able to verify that, then I think once or twice a week having these group sessions is worthy. And I think it's time well spent. And this is supplementing the one-on-one coaching, obviously, that's happening with manager or whoever and those reps. But the group trainings, I think, what I've done in the past is I have a running list. So everybody has to bring a call. And when we end one call, we know who's bringing a call to the next call, or calls, I should say. So bring a good call, bring a bad call, John, Ollie, you're up next on Thursday. We all meet at 11 o'clock. You know you need to bring a call. If you don't bring a call, I'm going to go into SalesLoft. I'm going to go into whatever tool that we're using. I'm going to pull up one of your calls. VanillaSoft. There you go. Sorry. But you get my drift. Like, I'm going to go into the system and I'm going to pull up the song, a call that I can find that's recorded and play it at random. So if you really are bought into that process of like getting help and getting peer support, then I'm sure people will, actively do that. But a lot of times people forget, they get busy, or they're not really trying to participate too much. And so you have to kind of put them on the spot. And I think there is value in playing the person who's really good at cold calling regularly and setting an example of what good looks like. So I don't think that we want to shy away from necessarily from Johnny, cold caller the best, from demonstrating his skills on a regular basis. And if people are uncomfortable with that, I have the mentality of, well, then let's work on your game so you can get up there and beat Johnny on the spot as well. But to create a environment that is not sort of recognizing that stellar ability because we're worried about other people's feelings and, maybe retracting or disengaging on the team, then I think that's why you have frontline management, is to identify those situations and say, hey, Sally, I noticed you're retracting in the calls. You're not being very proactive. Let's talk one-on-one. What's the issue? And let's overcome that, because this is going to be a staple in how we improve. And so fundamentally, you need people on the team that believe in watching tape effectively. So then the bad person, the person who's not really good or strong at cold calling, I think you have to create a culture of coaching on the team where everybody is there to root that person on and is there to help that person get better, because we're only as good as our weakest link. And if Sally is the weakest link, then we need to rally around her. And that means we might need to play her calls a little bit more often and see that incremental success. And when we're coaching on cold calling, we're not trying to coach the whole call, right? As a team, we're trying to narrow in on a specific facet a lot of times. How did we open the call? Did we sell the meeting versus the product, right? How did we overcome those objections? Did we have a strong power statement? Did we tie down at the end of our rebuttal? These little tactics that are fundamental in cold calling, we want to look at those things specifically a lot of times. And I think that's the other aspect of like group cold calling, is a lot of times like we just get on and listen to calls at random, and we really got to like focus on that. Guys, right now, we're focused on is the front end of the calls. We're not going to even listen to the last 2 minutes of the call. We're only going to listen to the first minute, the first 20 seconds, and then we're going to go to the next call, and we're going to critique that area of it. And we're only going to focus on openings or whatever areas of the call that we're concentrated on that at the time. And that is prioritized in by, you look at the aggregate in the team and say, well, they're all struggling to have lengthy calls. They're all struggling with the first layer of the cold call of getting past the opening and establishing that credibility. So let's just focus on there. And we won't even focus on anything else until we feel like we've mastered that first layer. But that's, again, in a group setting, it can be difficult to manage. You have simple things like people don't want to turn their cameras on. I was running late. I have a discovery call I need to jump to. They're not taking it very serious. But again, that's something as a leader that I'm going to sit down with you one-on-one as a group. And I'm going to really try and carry that flag and sell you on why this is an important part of our game. So again, if calling is the channel that we have optimized for, then we got to have these sessions on a group basis once to twice a week and make it as fun as possible too. I think that's the other aspect of these things. A lot of times you get on there and you make it this like grueling process. Like, we should be slapping high fives and congratulating people. And we should also be able to say, dude, come on, that was weak. I know you can do better. We should be able to have that level of dialogue with our peers. That's how people improve. And I really think that the last point I'll make is that the feedback that they're getting from their peers, I think, is a lot more, it resonates better than it does when it comes from someone like myself. When you have someone who's actually doing the job, who's making the calls every day, who's struggling like you, who's giving you critical feedback, I think that resonates really, really well. And so facilitating that is really on us as frontline managers.
So I wanted to ask you about something else, but the last thing that you said there has popped up another question that I now need to ask. So just to clarify, you said a good and a bad call. Was that right, from each rep for the next call?
Mm-hmm.
How much is that dynamic has to be sort of a vibe that the whole team shares anyway? Like, if the team literally hates each other, they're not all going to be high-fiving and like, yeah, go on, dude. It's just sort of not going to play out like that. But if they're getting on all right and there's that good atmosphere, that can be how that team call works. Have you ever done something like a like complete facepalm failure of the week type of thing, where everyone has a good laugh at the way that I bumbled through my call and someone told me to F off. Like that sort of camaraderie building, ice breaking type of thing. Have you done that, or is that something to keep away from?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, but again, you have to make it in a fun context. You're not there to like hurt anybody's feelings or embarrass them. That's just not professional. But yeah, you have maybe a little sound effects or something that you can add in there and yeah, make it entertaining. But that's why we bring the good calls and the bad calls, because quite frankly, we learn more from the bad calls than we do from the good ones.
Fair enough. Okay. So the other question I was going to ask you then, in a group of people, let's say it's 5 to 10 reps, something like that, you're going to have various styles. Some people, like you said, there might be one who's very funny, or like me, when I've called into the States, I have a very different accent, and that's very noticeable immediately. So I kind of play on that because that's how I think I'm going to get more success. If that wasn't necessarily the case, I'd do something different. Some people are just like really natural. Some people really need the script. There's a lot of variance.
Yeah.
When you're coaching a group of people and you have that variance in their styles and how they want to do things, you've kind of got to be careful to not let half of the room not be viable, like people who would listen to this and take value from it. How do you approach that?
I don't understand. Not half the people not take something from it. What do you help me understand the
question? If it's your turn to present your call this week, and I'm the sales manager, and your style is like ultra comedic and relaxed and fun,
doesn't follow the script, basically.
Yeah. But at the same time, I know that half of the other reps in the room are very monotonous about the script and they read it word for word. The coaching for you slenderly applies to them, but also at the same time, like you have to rein that rep in a little bit so that it's not just this whole other thing, because you've kind of got to sell the same product anyway. So for you as the coach, you're sort of hoping that the range of things that are said to a prospect are fairly like similar, not too close together. Otherwise it's the same human being, but then it would just be a robot. But you've got to be able to coach it without it being this chasm of things. But
yeah, you want people to use their style,
comedic rep, like what you'd say to them if it's their call review week. Half of the room may not have that much to say, or it doesn't really apply to them so much. Yeah,
well, if it's working, then we roll with it. But if it's off script, you're using your comedic punchlines and these things for things, and it's not landing, it's not working, the ball's not moving forward, then yeah, we definitely have to reel that in. But if it's working, I think that's what I would tell the other reps that they should be aspiring to, because you want them to be natural and organic in their approach. You want them to use their own style, if you will. Yes, I want you to know that the nuts and bolts of what we do and how we do it, but the way you deliver that, if you have your own stylistic approach and it works, and you only knew that through testing, then I would encourage that. And I would not want everyone to try and be a clone, if you will. I think the people who are probably the other ones that you're mentioning that are a little more reserved and they're following the script specifically, they just haven't gotten comfortable maybe with the subject matter enough to start incorporating it into the way that they communicate. They're still trying to sort of force the script, and it is coming across as not very natural in a lot of cases. It's like, it's good you can memorize something and you can regurgitate it, but if you can't kind of make it your own, then yeah, you're probably going to struggle in that process. So I think there's some things you can teach and some things you just cannot, and there's natural abilities and dispositions that people have. There's a certain rep that comes to mind specifically in an engagement that I was working on. It was exactly the same thing where we had like 12 reps, and one of them was just had his own style. I mean, he was very funny. He would disarm the prospects real quick. I mean, he was very unorthodox. I'll be straight up with you. And we would just sit there and listen to these calls, and we would all just like, what? I can't believe that even worked. But it just, for him, he was able to deliver it with the right pace, the right tone, the right level of assertiveness. He knew when to pull forward and pull back. It was just, there's a natural element to it. And I mean, he had years of experience over most of the team as well, life experience, work experience. And so I think it's like there's a level of confidence in one's style and the subject matter. And he was very confident with the subject matter. And I think that's really where it comes from, is the more comfortable you can get with the subject matter, the more you can kind of make it your own. And that's where I would try and concentrate on is like, yeah, this is how we want to position ourselves in the script. But if you can find another way of delivering that through your own comedic approach, or maybe you're an introvert and you want to supplement it with data and be very methodical, then whatever your style is, and if it works, then good. But I think the important thing about cold calling and sales in general is that we have to be chameleons, and we have to be willing to make adjustments and then, and adjust to, who we're calling. And that's the aspect of cold calling that no one ever really talks about, is that the context is always changing. So, you have to be able to be flexible. And if your comedic approach isn't landing, then, this person I'm mentioning, he knew when to pull that back and get super serious if he was dealing with an executive. So, that's why I feel like improv and these kinds of things are really helpful for reps if they, and role playing the right way, I think really helps them get more comfortable with, incorporating their own style into their cold calling. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question on how you would cross that chasm necessarily, but if it's working for the person who's using comedy and not following the script exactly, then I want to embrace that. I don't want to thwart people's creativity.
Yes, sir. I'm with you. So, any final quick tips before we move on to the one-on-one coaching?
No, I'm following your lead, man. No, I've been rambling and dropping my notes along the way.
All right, all good. So one-on-one coaching, I didn't prepare you for this, but in a moment we're going to do a live coaching. You're going to coach me on my cold calling intro, specifically my intro, and I'll have to dummy it out for you to do a role play. But hallmarks of good one-to-one coaching. So it's similar to the group, but obviously maybe a different cadence. And there's obviously going to be some variance between each rep and their the word I'm looking for is how open they are to it. I began with R, couldn't think of it, but so I went with that. And maybe their style too. So if, for instance, you're a very sort of humor and go with it, characterful cold caller yourself, and then you're coaching someone who is not that, or kind of the opposite or furthest away you could get. There's a few things like that which would be dynamics involved. So how do we make a good one-on-one coaching session?
Well, I think A is making sure that they anticipate, that they understand what they're getting into. A lot of times one-on-ones are very random. And it's just like we have it on the calendar and we go with the flow, and whatever we want to talk about, we talk about. And I think having some structure and them knowing that a part of their call is likely going to be inspecting their calls and looking into their calls, because the one-on-one call coaching for me happens as part of an overall one-on-one, so I don't have one-on-one specific coaching unless I really need to from a performance or a new hire standpoint around cold calling specifically. Part of my 40-minute one-on-one is going to be, okay, let's look at conversations that you've had this week, right? You've had 10 connects this week. We got 8 that were recorded. Let's go in and pop in and listen to as many of those as we can. So that's how I would typically structure that, because as I go through my normal one-on-one and I'm looking at not just activity, but meetings that were booked, meetings that, calls that we had with people that we like. And so we're going into to really understand that. So them having an understanding and an expectation that we're going to listen to calls in one-on-ones, I think is the first place to start. Don't surprise them. It's the same thing with any kind of feedback. They should kind of anticipate and know that that's part of the process, is that we're always evaluating the calls. Now, I like to drive a lot of times because a lot of my one-on-ones obviously are done over Zoom and remote meetings. And so I like to go into whatever tool we're using, VanillaSoft in this case, and pull up those calls together with them and just go through them one by one. And then the first thing I always ask, though, is what do you think you did well? In any feedback session, whether it's group or individual, after we listen to a call, the first thing I ask is, well, what did you think you did well? What worked in that call? Because it's too easy for people to start beating themselves up. And this becomes this very grueling process of and grilling episode of listening to one-on-ones. Listening to cold calls. So after we've talked about what went well and I share what I think went well in the call, the next thing is, well, what do you think you did? Where's the opportunity? Where do you think you could have done better? And so that's when we obviously spend more time in most cases on that side of it. And that's it. It's really that piece. And now what I'm doing along the way, though, over a period of time, weeks, months, is I'm keeping track of these things. I'm looking at, like I said earlier, are we struggling up front, the first layer? Are we struggling with certain objections? Are we struggling with the back end of the call? Where is there a repeated sticking point with this person, because you listen to a random set of calls, you're not going to really pick up on a pattern. And so your coaching is going to kind of be all over the place. And so I like to make sure that, I have a body of work over a period of time that I can say, hey, look, you're consistently struggling with this area. Do you agree? Yes, I do. Then let's talk about how we can, improve at that one area. And a lot of times it's subject matter, and we need to go back to the books and go back to the videos, and we need to double down on our subject matter and whatever, domain that we're in. But that's kind of the process that I would go through. And then one-on-one, I might listen to 5 calls. What did you do well? What could you improve on? And then the real feedback, I feel like, comes, you've done this 3, 4, 5 times minimum, where you can actually see a pattern across a number of calls. Because again, if someone had a bad day and they just botched an opening, and I'm coaching them on their openings, they might actually be really good, generally speaking, at opening a cold call or overcoming objections. It's just that one call, we just happen to listen to some screw up or something. So you really got to make sure that there's a pattern established to a certain degree.
Gotcha. So is that within a 1 hour one-on-one or half an hour? And what
40 minutes usually. I usually schedule for like 40 minutes, and sometimes they'll go longer, and sometimes they'll go shorter, but I generally schedule for 40.
So 40, and then how much of that is the core review?
10, 15. It depends on who you're talking to, right? Some reps who are new or struggling, you're probably going to spend more time looking at call reviews. Again, if calling is our primary channel, right? I do the same thing with email. I'll look at the emails that have gone out. I'll look at replies, and we'll look at the thread and look at what was said and how we can repivot in our personalization, sort of things like that. I know this isn't an emailing thing, but if calling is our channel and they're struggling and or new, I'm probably going to be ratcheting up the amount of time that I spend in call review with them, because I really think that the most important thing about their job as an SDR specifically is your ability to communicate value and have that interaction, have that conversation. We talk about research, we talk about personalization, we talk about all these, areas of the job. But the thing that really matters is when you get to that apex and you're actually on the phone in the moment with that prospect. And so there's much of our time that could be spent maximizing that, then that's what I would want to focus on. But again, some reps are really strong. And so I don't need to spend 10, 15, 20 minutes, twice a week with them on their calling, because I believe that they're doing really well, then I'm not going to belabor that, right? I'm going to focus on email. I'm going to focus on process. I'm going to focus on other areas that might need some help, or I'm just going to give them the time back because they're killing it. So it all depends, and the context is always changing.
Okay, cool. I'm with you. One thing I wanted to ask you before we even got into the whole group or one-on-one coaching, you said bring a bad and bring a good call. Obviously, the highlights kind of are worth taking with a pinch of salt, and the lowlights taken with a pinch of salt too. Not every call someone tells you to F off. Not every call they say, "Oh my God, I was just on your website. Please book a demo." But what's the validity in taking just a random sample of calls? Because at some point, obviously, it's got to actually have been a conversation, but that might be more like most of the conversations they're having. You can't coach too much off a win. You can only coach so much off of like a really bad call if they have one. So how much are you looking in the middle?
Yeah, I don't know. It's random samplings at that point, right? Because good and bad calls are all subjective. There's reps that will bring a bad call where they just got hung up on. I'm like, come on, you're trying to be funny? Right? Like bring me something with 30, 40 seconds, a minute minimum, where you actually had to throw a pitch, they turned it down and you got hung up on or whatever. So you see all flavors of it that way. And sometimes people will bring what they believe are good calls, which aren't good calls at all. But that's a good call for them in their mind because maybe they advanced the conversation to a certain degree. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how often I focus on the middle. I don't ask them, give me a call that was okay, if that's what you mean. Yeah. So I think I find those through the one-on-ones randomly through, because I listen to as many connects as I can every week with the teams that I manage. So each rep is going to have 5, 10, and I have a running list of every call that I scrutinize. And so over like a month's period, I'll get up to hundreds of calls that I've been scrutinizing, and then I have a rubric that I score them on, 1 through 5 on these 9 different points. And, if I'm seeing across the team or across an individual that they're struggling in one of these rubric points, then, we look for that in their calls. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. I think you did. It's more, they are bringing the best and the worst. You're finding the blend of everything and making your notes and what you ask and what you particularly ask them, as you go on. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I don't want to do, a lot of leaders will fly by. They'll listen to one call. They'll listen to two calls. They may not even listen to calls for weeks. It's just very random when they are listening to calls. And I feel like that's the thing that you really get a sense of who's got it and who doesn't is that piece of it. Now, if they're not making enough calls and there's no calls to listen to, then that's a whole nother issue. But yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. You ready to coach me?
I will do my best. Yes.
All right. So telling you the absolute truth, the intro is what I'm most interested in. And the rest of it then becomes the rest of my script and the way that I had this conversation that I'm about to deliver to you. It wouldn't make sense to go through the rest of it now. It's too intricate and way down the path. So I'll just do the intro, the first line or two, depending on how you see it. And then I'd love for you to tell me, say it again or do it this way. And I like that you did this. What did I think I did well? How can we improve it? That type of thing. Yeah. Let's do it like real life. So,
but before you do it, how many times have you practiced this? And you have it written down and all this?
I'm doing this straight from memory, but I think I can do it pretty good. And I probably said it 200 times, which isn't a lot, but it's a lot when you haven't done loads of cold calling in your life.
Cool. Let's do it.
You can be horrible. I will not be in tears. It's all good.
Okay.
All right. So obviously starting the call, and then I say, "Hi, am I speaking to Derrick?"
Yeah, this is Derrick.
Hey, Derrick, it's Ollie calling. I'm hopefully for you the only British cold caller that you'll end up speaking to today. Would you mind if I took a minute to tell you why I'm calling?
Sure. What's up?
And that's where I'm going to cut off because the rest of it was a bit of an experiment. Okay.
So what we have to work with there is kind of what I heard is basically a double opening. So you ask for permission to move forward, which I like that. I think that's especially important if it's a sort of an empathetic style of cold calling when you use the permission-based ask up front. And then you had a little bit of a pattern interrupt there with the British cold caller, only British cold caller today. So I like those pieces. Yeah, I think for me though, I talk about this a lot is like the tone and not really the pace so much, but it's hard to hear you. It seemed very monotone. That's the only from that piece, the only thing I can really pick apart. And you have to remember too, like not everybody goes for humor. I know I've mentioned humor, and because I don't use humor, I also don't respond to it. Right. So when people use humor on me, they lose credibility. If they use it too early like that in a cheesy way, which no offense, but that was kind of cheesy. And that's how, if I was a busy executive sitting at my desk and I got that call, I was like, okay, that was clever, funny, haha, but what's up? What's the scoop? Yeah. Give it to me. And so I think the fastest you can get to the point, and that's why I would say an opening, if you're saying an opening should include, I'm with VanillaSoft, this is what we do, is how we do it, so we're different. A power statement of some sort. So the first layer of a cold call, and when I'm coaching, is the opening, right? There's a reason for call / research, and then there's a power statement, right? And so you can deliver that through a preamble, which is you just go through those three steps all in one, and don't ask any questions, don't ask any permission, don't give them opportunity to talk. It's like a 40-second preamble. Or you can do like a double opener, like, hey, Ollie, this is Derrick with 3Link. How have you been? I've been okay. I've been good. Who is this? What are you talking about? Okay, I know you weren't expecting my call. Do you mind if I take 17 seconds to tell you what we do and why I'm calling? So that's a double opener piece, right? You're asking two questions before you even get to it. And I think that's definitely a very empathetic style of calling. So if you're using a single opener where it's just kind of like, hey, this is who I am. Do you have a minute for me to tell you why I'm calling? Yes. And you get to it, I would have wanted to hear your power statement. So just asking me how I'm doing and opening the call that way, I think that's the easy part there. But can you get to the point? And I didn't hear you get to a point on anything with me.
Gotcha. Yeah. So what I think I heard is my delivery was fairly flat in tone potentially. So that might have had some more impact if I went up like that or some variance.
Derrick, hey, this is Ollie. I'm calling from VanillaSoft. Yeah,
bit of accentuation, so that might have played a part of it. I think the tactical gimmick that I was going for didn't make sense if I reeled it all off in one go. was why I did it that way. Could I have distilled it down quicker or something to get to the power statement about why, like the question that I might then ask in the next piece? Possibly that would have been the next big piece. Could I have said, instead of hopefully I am the only British caller that you might, like, that's a lot of words. Maybe it could have been, hey, I'm calling from England just to ask you, like, have you got a problem with following up on leads? It still like involves the thing I was trying to use as my differentiator, my like listen worthy moment in the call. That was what I was going for. Otherwise, like, I personally dislike it. This is my own style coming across, and this is sort of how you have to bear in mind the various styles in coaching.
Yeah, of course.
I dislike it a little bit when you get, hey, can I have a minute to tell you why I'm calling? And you say, yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that because everybody does that. And then like the next thing that comes is so boring and like 2 minutes of wad of text. It's like, oh God, please let me
that
off
has to
this
be
call.
carefully crafted. Exactly. That you can't wing that piece. Those first 20 seconds, those first 40 seconds, they're everything to the cold call.
Yeah. So the follow on piece, particularly if you're going for this sort of personable angle like I was in that, you then can't go into this like, we are the leading provider of blah 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 blah. It sounds like completely off piece and different. So you have to like pick style, own it, stay with it, and deliver that the whole way through. So
yeah, and I think I would know that you're British too, because it would just, you're calling California, and right
with
I
my
could hear it in your voice.
+44 number, and yeah, I don't sound like I'm from California. Okay, so
Hey,
what are your
dude.
9 pointers for scoring? And I'm interested, rough take, where might I have landed with that? I know it's not the whole call, so it might not actually apply, but like roughly speaking.
Yeah, so I already mentioned the first layer of it, those first sections, first points. So customer stories are part of the rubric as well. How often are we incorporating customer stories? Rebuttals are in there. Confirming value is one as well towards the end. Selling the meeting, so closing, right? Where am I at? I lost count. So open, research, reason for call, power statement, customer stories, rebuttals. Are you counting these? I'm rattling them off of my
I'll say 8
framework.
because that means one more. I don't know.
Yeah, and closing, selling, confirming value, selling the meeting.
Is it not really possible to score me because I didn't go through most of that?
Right. But
Well,
I have them
the
broken
first
into
bit.
3 categories. So it's like the first layer is the first 3, then there's the middle 3, and then there's the back 3. And so you have 3 layers that you're trying to get through in the conversation. And that first layer is all resistance. Their resistance is very high because they don't know you, what you're calling about. They haven't been able to compartmentalize what this is all about. And so when you've called and let them know that they don't know you, that's a box. And what you're calling about, that's a box. And these sorts of things. So if they can put you in those boxes in the first 20, 40 seconds, then you can fall naturally right into the second layer where they start giving you real objections, not just blow-offs, right? Like, that's not me, or I'm good, I'm busy, I'm running into a meeting. If you've set up the first half really well with good, value bars, if you will, then you land in the second layer, and that's where the magic really happens. And once you're at the second layer and you're bobbing and weaving with customer stories and rebuttals and positioning statements and probing questions, which I left out of the rubric, that's where, most of the call happens. And then you get into the back end where it's, so sounds like we can help you. You mentioned this was an issue. You confirmed that, my solution might be a good fit. Why don't we get some time with Ollie? This is what Ollie's going to take you through, and why meeting with Ollie is so important. So.
Gotcha. Okay, let's not ask for a score then because I didn't go through all of that. But I'll just take it you meant 10 out of 10. No problem.
Yeah,
I'll take that.
You're Ollie, man. Of course.
Well,
You have me on the webinar, so I have to give you some extra points.
Sometimes, like if you're the host of the show, sometimes you just make stuff up, and sometimes it lands. That was one of those occasions. I'll take that. I'll say I did an all right job. The tone thing, I didn't think you were going to say that. You probably fairly rightly called it out. That's one of those things you learn on call review. I did review my own calls, and I did think, God, I sound a bit.
Well, if you listen to your webinars and your interviews and your podcast, I've been listening to you for years, so I just know that about you. And you have an even keel tonality when you're communicating, and hey, that's not a bad thing. And with some people, they're going to appreciate that because again, every person is different. We all receive things differently. Me, I'm a high low type of person, so I always appreciate when someone can give me some energy, but then can pull back on that energy when they need to and be more methodical and even kill, if you will. But yeah, I mean, being able to demonstrate the flexibility, I think, is what's important.
When I open up the shows here, I have to, there's a performative aspect of it. Yeah, I'm me still. But it's like you add like 25%. You have to, right, guys, welcome to the show. And then
there it is.
You come into it. Like, you can't just, if I called you and you're the CEO of some big ass company and I go, hey, Derrick, I'm just calling you. You're like, oh my God. Okay, relax, mate.
Yeah.
Like, have a
doing
coffee
the most, putting a little extra on it.
Yeah, so a little bit of it. I noticed that when I listen to my own recordings, I start quite well, and there's a bit of fluctuation, and then it kind of wavers into natural discourse. So there's that. Okay, so we're coming up sort of on time. We have a little bit of time left. I want to throw up some things that people can walk away with. Most of the time, that's what do coaches do wrong, or things to be wary of. We've already talked about a bunch of them, but is anything coming to mind right off the bat?
Yeah, I think one thing that comes up a lot, and I always try and convey this to people when I'm coaching them, is when you're coaching on cold calling, you're a lot of times coaching on people and their style of communication that is part of their identity. And if you don't tread lightly in some ways, then you're going to really mess people up in the headspace, right? They're going to make them more insecure getting onto these calls. And that's why it's really important to really pick up those very specific areas, and not to say, in general, your cold calls suck, right? Like you really want to like specify on certain areas. And the reason I bring this up is because when we talk about tone and pace and pitch, basically, that's the area you got to be you have to ask if it's okay to coach them on those sorts of things, right? I had a rep that I worked with and brought into an organization, recently brought into another organization, and we were talking recently, and she was recalling some of our one-on-one cold call coaching from the previous organization. And she was making a joke. We were all at dinner, and she was like, so yeah, how's my pitch now, Derrick? Am I too high pitched? Because it was very like, she would call him, hi. And I had to let that play a few times through our coaching. I didn't want to step on our toes and like make it feel like I was, trying to beat her up as a person. But I was trying to convey at that point, like, you might be coming in a little too high on a frequency level, and you show a frequency, like literally like a slide with frequency waves, right? And say like, you're way up here right now. If you can just bring it down like 3 or 4 octaves, I feel like that would resonate better. And when she practiced with the serious tone, hi, this is, Rebecca, that's in our name, but hi, this is Rebecca, and then you can use your pitch when you are at that point in the conversation, then that's great. You have the ability to go there. Someone like an Ollie struggles to get to that point. Like I have a deep voice, so I'm naturally very low in bass in the way, so I have to be very conscious of, hi, this is Derrick, and I'm calling from 3Link Consulting. I have to be intentional about that. So when you're coaching people, it's very easy to offend them because you're coaching on some areas that they are part of their identity. And so you have to ask, is it okay if I give you this feedback? Is it okay if I talk about these sorts of things? And because it's not just subject matter related. It's easy to say you explained the product wrong, or you explained this incorrectly, right? Like that's binary. The stuff that's a little more in the gray area is trying to get people to, speed their pace up. I had a rep that was in the Austin area. We called him Big Country. 6'4", big guy, but he had a Southern drawl, was very slow in the way he spoke. And that was the only feedback I ever gave to him. Like, dude, if you could just speed up, I think you would kill it. But I had to wait a couple, sessions before I felt comfortable enough to give him that feedback. And when I did, I asked him, do you mind if I touch on something that might be a little bit more on the personal side? It might, it's more stylistic. Do you mind if I give you some feedback about that? And when they're open to it, then it's easy to touch on those things. But that's the thing that I would say a lot of managers or reps, not managers, but coaches fail to keep in mind is that, it's good to give feedback and all those things, but you don't want to like get people to retract or send them backwards, and be careful of the subject matter that you're coaching on. It does border on, what they identify as their personality.
I think if you get that wrong, that's often born out of potentially lack of experience or having seen this play out. There's a lot of, if I was you, and that's how to sort of lose someone. And primarily, like, you're not me, you're not like better than me or something, horrible feeling. So that's one side of it. But also that's trying to make me in your shape, whether right or wrong or whatever shape I currently am and whatever shape you are. That's not how you do it. So like that's so common, particularly in sales managers, because of the lack of training they get in management. They're then just, you're good, go make other people good. They don't necessarily know how to distill that and then make other people good at exactly the way that they can be the best. So that's such a huge thing that I've seen. Even in in our marketing team, if we hired 3 new people, they'd be 3 different types of people. Exactly. If I tried to make them do it my way, it probably wouldn't work. And that
was my biggest mistake as a first-time manager. When I was 26, I took over an outside sales team, and I took it over because I was a top rep, and I was really good at selling what I was selling at the time. And that's why I earned the promotion to management, which was not an easy thing to do within this organization. And the first thing that I did was I tried to manage people like they were my client. I knew it worked for me. I was a first-time manager, and so I'm like, everybody needs to do it like me and like I did before. And I lost the team. In the first 3-4 months, I could tell like I wasn't connecting with people. They were pulling away. They were avoiding me. And I was all in my head as a first-time manager. And one of the top reps at the time, he pulled me aside and went to lunch, and he said, "Look, you're not managing clones, and it's just stuck with me. It just stuck with me. That phrase, you're not managing clones. You have to understand people, and they all have their own motivators and different things. And so while we're trying to get this repeatable model in place that has this like consistent formation to it, we have to embrace people to allow them to go off the beaten path and find new ways for this to be accomplished. Right. So yeah, I even to this day, I think it's still, and I've been coaching people for a long time, it's still something you have to be very cognizant of like, you don't want people to like pull back into their shell. You want them to like ask for the coaching, and they're not going to be asking for it if you're making them feel like shit. So,
Good note to end on. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. This was good fun. I enjoyed it. Hopefully you, Mr. and Mrs. Watcher, have also enjoyed it. Plenty of questions that we went through. I'll have to make a follow-up to this at some point. But before you go, obviously 2 quick bits of housekeeping. Number 1, we always get this question, hey, can I get the recording, or when will there be one? Will there be one? Tomorrow. You'll get it if it's not already an on-demand replay that you're watching. So there's that. But the most important thing before you leave, please make sure that you connect and follow Derrick. So where can they do that, sir?
Yeah, hit me on LinkedIn if you want to link up there. Derrick is 3Link Sales is my LinkedIn handle. That's also my handle for Instagram. Derrick is 3Link Sales. And of course, check out the website, 3linksales.com.
And one thing you missed off somewhere that I may have been before. What else? What am I talking about here?
The podcast, the Sales Consultant Podcast. Yes, that's also on the website. But yes, I run a weekly podcast where I interview industry experts around driving revenue and the toughest problems that revenue teams are facing today in doing that. And part of that audience is other consultants, and part of that audience are industry experts like Ollie. And so definitely go check out the Sales Consultant Podcast.
I vouch. Good show. Better host. Go watch it.
Thank you.
Go listen. Give it a like. Give it a subscribe. Give it a 5-star review too. Okay, cool. We're out of time. We'll let you guys go. But thanks so much for paying attention this long. If you managed to, well done to you. Have a much better attention span than I do. Stick around. There'll be more shows like this. I think we're doing an email coaching one very soon, and we'll definitely have Derrick back. So with that, thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Ollie.